All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. In this webinar, we talk about the top reasons why people really struggle to implement SharePoint and kind of the hidden problems that you don't generally think about when you get into it, and then you get pretty deep in and you realize that you've got a long way to go, and you've already made substantial investment from that standpoint. So what we're going to talk about is kind of highlight why we start looking at SharePoint as a solution, where that sometimes breaks down, and really what birthed Omnidek as a viable SharePoint alternative for the small to mid-sized business. So as I go through here, I'm not going to PowerPoint you to death, so I'll do my best to run through here fairly quickly, PowerPoint-wise, then we can kind of jump into some software here. But we like to first and foremost start with the problem. What a lot of companies are experiencing at different phases of this is this concept called app overload or appageddon. And we start getting to a point in our company and in our technology growth that we've got 12, 15, 20 applications that run our business. And we're trying to figure out some method, some means to have a place where all this stuff inevitably ends up, like a centralized document management or content management. So we look at Microsoft OneDrive or SharePoint as kind of the folder structure to support that. But we also start looking at elements of SharePoint with form and flow and some of the other utilities within the application to try and start streamlining things like expense reporting and time collection and ticket requesting. And before we know it, we kind of get to this point within SharePoint where it becomes super, super heavy. So what we kind of highlight, just to kind of focus on this problem a bit, is that what really initiated app overload or appageddon was about 15 years ago. We had an IT guy or IT girl, and she or he had a 2-year roadmap for their technology. We knew what we were going to buy, why we were buying it. We knew what modules we were going to implement. It was generally driven by using more of the software we already had, like our ERP or our accounting or project management systems. But it was also, we were trying to get better visibility, better structure, better process controls. And there was a method to the way that we bought software to meet those requirements. Well, we got really smart about 15 years ago. We said, you know what, I'm moving to the cloud. I don't even have a server anymore, so I must not need the IT guy. And in doing so, we distributed the responsibility of buying technology. Effectively, anybody with the Amex, because everything's on a subscription now, could effectively buy a widget for the company that they believe made their life a little bit better. And what we didn't anticipate was that the 3-year, 5-year, 10-year impact of that was that we would have 12 different applications running our business across 38 employees, let's say, and we've created 400 connections, 400 username and passwords, 400 settings tables that we have to set up. We're trying to connect these things through integrations and sync tools, and it's become a very chaotic mess. Also, we're non-committal. When you spend $20,000 on a software application or more, you're a little bit more committed to seeing that thing succeed. Well, when it's on a subscription and we can churn and burn, you're talking about a 2-year app turnover of almost 40%. That's newly added software and removed software on the subscription. So over the 2 years, changing out almost half of your technology stack is creating absolute management nightmares. And this is really what birthed people into looking at more of an enterprise or company-wide solution. Now, this problem of appageddon is really one that's already been solved. Fortune 500 companies have done this for years, and they build intranet portals. They build very elaborate, enterprise deployments on custom software. Some of them will use SharePoint, some of them will use IBM WebSphere, even Salesforce and ServiceNow. But they'll build these large company-wide platforms, and they'll spend millions of dollars a year. They'll have full-time development resources, and it'll take years to fully deploy it. And it's never done implementing. There's always new things that they're adding to the intranet portal. Well, at a small business level, they don't have that luxury. We don't have a dedicated development resource, or if we do, we only have one, right? We certainly don't have a team. So it's too expensive for us to even think about doing that, right? Also, our processes aren't that complicated. There's not a million rules. It's usually a supervisor approves something, right? So we start getting into these realizations that also, I don't even have an IT professional that's on staff with me. So That's why companies say, you know what, I'm just going to buy this little app and it's going to put out this one fire. And then if I have another fire, I'll buy another app. And this is really where companies get to a point, and they experience this Appageddon at various phases of this timeline. Now, enter in SharePoint. Well, SharePoint, we see this shiny little logo in the middle of our Office 365, and it's included. And we start saying, oh, wow, I see that you can do just about anything with SharePoint. And that's true. However, you know, well, let me say this, what we expect on the SharePoint side is that we're going to be background noise. Let me 1 second. Right. So what we expect from SharePoint is that we're going to be able to centralize our business. We're going to be able to share documents back and forth. We're going to have employee collaboration, and we're going to have this cool intranet portal experience for our employees, but we can even face it to our customers and vendors and have this extranet experience as well. And all of our processes will be automated. And this is the lure of SharePoint. I already own it, and it's just embedded in my system, and I can build anything that I want. Now, what actually happens is that we get lured in with the fact that, hey, we can start building this. It seems to be a low code, no code system, so it's not as intensive. Maybe I can get by with the IT staff that I currently have. And what ends up happening is that there's these unexpected consequences when you start whiteboarding processes and you start looking at all the different nuances and all the number of different processes you have, especially the larger the company. You start realizing that, man, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in, even $100,000 into the development of this, I've only got 5 of these processes fully implemented. I've got another 20 that are half baked and not really there. And we're staring at maybe COVID, maybe things that are disruptive to our business. And this is where a lot of times companies get to a friction point because we've blown our budget and it's way more complicated than we originally got into. Now, the reason SharePoint really underdelivers is because of a difference in low code versus no code. It doesn't seem like a big one, but it has everything to do with the fact that a low code system still requires a coding. To do anything constructive, anything of value to an enterprise, it's going to require a SharePoint developer and a third party or somebody that works for the company that understands how to build this to actually pull something off. And they have to be a coder. Because that coder is not the person working in the department, there's going to require a translation. Generally, it's the person who's been doing X whatever activity, HVAC maintenance or whatever the industry is, trying to translate that to a computer science graduate, and hopefully we can find the right cadence. On top of that, we might be implementing a new process that has to be defined and has to be rolled out. And this back and forth of telephone of here's how it should be and here's how you need to do it, this is what breaks down, because businesses are complex and there's intimate knowledge that the end user has that's hard to articulate in a scope of work to a developer. So the difference between low code and a no code is that the person who's actually the industry expert is building the process. It's dragging and dropping and defining how they want their individual department, even after their specific process that they're involved in, how it flows, the questions, the data that we get out of it. And this is a big piece of it on why a lot of these processes break down. In addition, the overarching architecture of Microsoft is a file that's sitting in a folder. And SharePoint is the ultimate version of this. It's a collaborative web-based folder structure for all of our content. But if you think about it from this perspective, is that the data in the form is really what we care about. And we don't want to necessarily go search it. Of course, that's a requirement. But we want to be able to see this data, and maybe not how it's represented in that one form of a purchase request or a work authorization. We want to see it in aggregate. How does this affect the budget? How do we see these processes mature out, and what type of visualizations can I actually create off of it? And when you realize that you can't do that with a PDF, but you can with a data element, you start realizing that this whole effort of storing things in a file structure really breaks down, and it ultimately can't deliver what the end game is requiring. So what we really believe that we created at Omnidek is really for the first time is that the idea of an intranet portal out of the box. One that your team, the existing team, can build on your own without a developer required. And it creates effectively a repetitive assembly line for all process improvements that are going to flow through the company. So whether we're talking about putting a better control on purchase requisitioning and have those creating commitments in our accounting system, maybe tailoring the time collection across division, maybe the different specialty trades that we might conduct, having a tailored experience. But when these processes flow through my ecosystem, it's a collaborative experience, not a 4-mile long Teams conversation or Slack conversation, but a collaborative conversation with the people involved in the process, even the customer or vendor, about this particular process that I created on my own. And this assembly line structure, because it's repetitive in nature, it initiates with a form, it's one inbox for all the different forms that would come through the company, as well as the document management or the content management in data form, which is what Omnidek provides. We think this is a better alternative and a better solution or interpretation of the idea of an intranet portal for the small to mid-sized business. Now, what I want to point out, though, is that a lot of the reasons why people choose Microsoft is that, there's an old adage, nobody's ever been fired for choosing IBM at like an IT level, because you knew IBM was always going to be there, and if they couldn't do it, nobody could do it. Well, Microsoft has the same connotation. You have a best-in-class provider, they own the world effectively, so we feel comforted in being able to use something as part of their toolkit. Well, Omnidek still gives you this ability. The data resides in the Azure cloud and Azure SQL database underneath the hood. It connects to tools like Power App and Power BI. We can archive documents to SharePoint. So we can still leverage the Microsoft suite. You're still in the same server that you would be if you were using SharePoint in the cloud. However, it's more of a graceful and more elegant interpretation of this concept of an intranet portal. So if you were to kind of look at where Omnidek kind of plays in this arena, is that you have these kind of simple solutions, which some companies will jump off of SharePoint, or they'll punt on a particular process and go do it in like a smaller application like a KissFlow, which does forms and workflow, or Monday. Maybe it's more task oriented. We can just build a form and track it in Monday. And these are good off the shelf type solutions because they're good at putting out a fire, but they're not an enterprise anything. They try to be, but they're not. On the enterprise side, you have major players. You have Microsoft SharePoint, Salesforce, ServiceNow. These are major cloud-based providers that can offer a platform for you to build a lot of things in. Well, if you look at where Omnidek compares, is that it compares with the architecture and the technical requirements that are offered at the enterprise level, but the cost to implement, the price per user, the speed to be able to get up and running is more comparable. I'm talking about under 30 days, you can be fully implemented. So it compares delivery-wise to the simpler solutions, but the complexity of the enterprise. What we showcase here before I kind of jump into the software here is kind of a prototypical customer of ours. We like to highlight Caretaker Landscape. They give us a 5-star rating in Capterra, and they have 200 employees. But what makes their employees a little bit more challenging is they have Spanish-speaking labor and English-speaking labor. So we had to accommodate that through our forms and work process. Also, they replaced a $300,000 SharePoint implementation after 2 years of development on it. We replaced their timekeeping system, multiple instances of Zendesk, which were them it was too cumbersome with SharePoint, so they just tried to do it in Zendesk. And so we eliminated that. But in 30 days, they were fully implemented. They have over 50 plus processes that run their company. We saved them, forget the development costs on the SharePoint, they've continued that, but just hard dollar savings on the process improvement. 167,000 is based on our 3-year calculation on the cost savings, with a 3.2 month return on investment. And their comment was that they had been trying to solve things in SharePoint for years, and it was just too complicated. And Omnidek was able to solve the simple things quickly, but then also start looking at and migrating into more of the mission critical processes. And this is what the company after company after company that goes towards Omnidek as the alternative to a SharePoint implementation experiences. Now, the big value here, and we're going to get into this in a second, is this assembly line concept, is that there's a very repetitive nature in what we do. There's no modules of our software. So what that means is that another form or another process in the list doesn't require any training. It's just another form that they have access to that they're required to fill out when certain events happen. Those processes, though, flow through one inbox. Just like I get emails directed to my email account, it's no different in the intranet portal, but it's outside of email. It's in a controlled, secure environment where we're having private conversations about that process. Well, because of this assembly line approach where we're using the same feature set regardless of whatever forms we're processing, it's a 90% reduction in time and cost to implement new process improvements. You're designing in a whiteboard session, building it while you're designing it, and then implementing and testing it out literally that afternoon. Compare that to a 3-month SharePoint build out for that one process, or buying another application to run your company. We also will eat at email. 60% of your email is now replaced because we're doing it in interportal chat, as well as we can reduce up to 50% of the software as a service, literally within the first 30 days of companies that choose to migrate to Omnidek. So that's all. I'm going to PowerPoint you to death. I apologize if that was a little much, but I'm going to jump into the software here. Just to kind of give you a little bit of an understanding of kind of a day in the life of a fully developed application, I'm going to start with the caretaker landscape example. This company uses Omnidek for literally every single process inside of their company. These are every form that they built. They have an intern that was in charge. It started off as an intern, now they're a full-time person. And all they do is they're in charge of process improvements inside of the company. So anything from irrigation work tickets to their equipment forms, their chemical inspections, right? Even down into safety. Well, I mentioned that they have Spanish-speaking labor as well. So you can see the translations in the form support as helper text to the individuals that are actually filling out the particular form itself. So how we get to this point of building forms, we can kind of break this little presentation down in a couple of different sections. Building the forms is a very straightforward example. So I'm going to give kind of a case example that happens a lot inside of companies, and we'll kind of do a little bit of a presentation from that standpoint. Let's say, for example, I have a process that I want to put some process controls on purchasing around the company. I want to implement a purchase request that gets routed around and approved, maybe job and cost coded. And then I need that to import back into my accounting system as a commitment. So when we get the invoice in, I've got the approved commitment. And if it's within a threshold, I can approve it and pick up that vendor discount, right? That's a perfect example of how you could use Omnidek. Well, in this case, because that's kind of an out of the box kind of process, there's probably other companies that have already built that and have shared it into the marketplace. This is a shared community of processes that are just kind of accelerators or kind of an idea bank for other processes you can use in the system. In this case, if I'm looking for purchase requests or purchase orders, I'm going to go to the purchase order section and I'm going to see a couple of different flares of what companies have built. And if I say, okay, well, maybe this one's already pre-built for the accounting system that I have, well, I'm going to simply select it and add it to my library. By doing so, now I can just start making it my own. Well, if I come into the application, let's just call it that expense or purchase request here, this is how I start tailoring it. Let's say, for example, I don't need this required date. I just simply delete it. If I want to maybe change this question from employee to maybe supervisor, right? I'm simply just updating the questions and answers. If I want to hook this to my data sources, these could be simple spreadsheets and lists. These could be full-blown integrations to my back office accounting, project management, even an Access database. Any data tables that we want to synchronize to, we can do it. And this way, if I'm hooking this to my employee list, I simply select the employee data field, and let's say I want to have the name and the employee ID to search by. So building the form is as simple as dragging and dropping and kind of creating whatever cadence that I want on the form. When it comes to doing math, like in this example, this is doing quantity times unit price. The form designer functions just like an Excel spreadsheet where I would effectively just put in a simple calculation, multiplying these two values together. This can even handle more complex things like JavaScripting, if we have condition-based questions and answers, maybe a reimbursement on travel only if it's over 30 miles traveled, things of that nature. So appreciate building forms. We take all of the complexity of the UI and the front end experience away. And this is the type of stuff that we talk about in a whiteboard session, talking about how we want to implement XYZ process. We're literally building it with the team that's going to be involved with it. So this is the first piece of it, kind of in simplistic form example. Now, we also have the capacity to do more complex forms. In this example down here, I'm going to bring this element into the form. And let's say, for example, I want to do a more elaborate, maybe detailed daily production report. Well, in this case, I can build out headers of the production report. Maybe it's the job, the superintendent, maybe the date we're working, and maybe a note section. And then from there, I may want to have a couple of different tabs with some grids that support maybe labor for the first one. And that labor tab, I'm going to say, okay, well, I want the grid to lay out to be the employee, maybe their craft type, maybe if it's regular overtime, perhaps, and then maybe I want to do their total hours worked down here. And then I want them to spread it across the cost codes for that job. So I'll do a repeating asset. So in this case, I just built my grid the way that I might have just mimicked an existing app that I'm using, or maybe a spreadsheet that I've currently got in circulation. So imagine being able to do this for every division of the company to better gather the required data that management cares about, or possibly what's going to drive an executive dashboard downstream. Now, adding additional tabs, you're talking about production units, per diem, maybe the equipment on the job site, right? Percent completes as of dates or whatever else. All of that is fair game because you're in control of how you want to lay out these forms. So I kind of show you this just to kind of touch on the first point, is that you can do a whole heck of a lot visually by building forms inside of Omnidek with absolute ease. Now, the next piece of this is, okay, I have this form, and let's continue with the purchase request example. I have this purchase request. Well, I need this to go on a workflow and a route. Well, Omnidek does a very novel thing that makes administering our software super simple. We ship the application with a hierarchy structure. So this means that you can scale 50, 60, 70 processes inside of your company. And the administration, let's say, for example, I move an employee from one group to another. Maybe I move them from my new hire portal, which we'll get into that in a minute. Maybe I move them from a new hire portal to wherever they're going to go work in the company. Well, they're going to inherit the view of the portal. They're going to inherit what forms they have access to, even down to the question level, what they can even see, or if it's read only or required. So by administering Omnidek with the hierarchy structure, you can lean on this if you're going to build a workflow. So let's say, for example, I've got this workflow for purchase requisitioning, and I want to have anybody underneath here that does a purchase request. I want it to be able to route to the direct supervisor, no matter how many direct supervisors that I have. Well, if I'm going to build a workflow to support that, it's just this easy. I'm going to select the form. In this case, I'm just going to do an example. So let's say this is the purchase request workflow. I'm going to put all the initiators that I want this workflow to apply to in the start node. Then I'm going to say, okay, I want the direct supervisors to approve. So I'm going to actually add a hierarchy node and put all the direct supervisors in this grouping. Then we're going to give them maybe $1,000 threshold. So after $1,000, if it's over that, I need the VP of Finance to approve it. So in that case, I'll do a condition, and the conditions are any sets of questions on the forms with an operator greater than, less than, equal to, a range, whatever else. So if it's over, let's say, set amount, then now it's got to go to a VP of Finance, which I'll put in the first approval node, and then maybe it can go to accounting, right? And then if it's not, it can just go over to accounting or purchasing, perhaps. So this visually is how easy it is to affect a workflow. And this could be built across a whole bunch of different departments all at once. So the reason I kind of show you this is the ease of building the form, the ease of administration, and the ease of setting up workflows is this is actually what we're creating inside of Omnidek, is this centralized hub for every process improvement that's going to flow through your company. So from here, you can see this is a day in the life. This is our implementation of Omnidek. It's a branded experience. I've got everything from expense reports to out of office requests to weekly manager reports. It's all flowing through one system. I can approve, hold, or reject with a very easy little dial pad up here. And also I can chat with the people that are involved in this particular process all at once. Now, the value add of having this conversation versus a Slack or a Teams chat conversation, which is getting so prevalent, is that I'm not talking about the office Christmas party in this weekly manager report or where we're going to go get lunch. I'm talking about the specific requirements of this specific process. And what Omnidek gets right is that we have the perfect balance of not only the file or the form or whatever you want to call it, but we have the conversation alongside it that will stay as part of the corporate record in addition to the audit log forever. So the impact of this, aside from the efficiency of the assembly line, is that me as a high-level manager, I can be alerted when certain conditions are met with these little bubbles over here in what we call insights, so just conditioned reports. If I want to be able to drill in and let me go look and analyze my expense reports that are coming in for everybody, maybe they haven't, the ones that haven't been approved yet, right? Well, I now have this grid where I can come in and maybe group it by expense type if this is the way that I want to view this particular form, and see how much did we spend on marketing and entertainment or marketing promotions. If I come into here, I'm going to search this one out because this was one that caught my eye the other day. Great American Cookie for $80. I said, what on earth did we buy this for? So when I clicked here, I looked at the receipt. I saw 2 cakes that we bought. And then so whenever I drilled into here, I said, okay, let me see the form. I see, okay, this was cookies for the hospital during the COVID unit. And then I asked, Allison a particular question, why did we spend this money or whatever else? So this ability to not only go analyze these transactions in mid-work process or after they've been completed based upon those conditions, lets me be able to initiate these conversations just like I would kind of add them in a Teams conversation, but we're having a conversation about that particular business process. And Omnidek was built to be drill down oriented, drill down to not only see the information, but also to ask questions with the group involved in it. Now, the last piece of this is where we become a pseudo content management, file management alternative. Although we can respect SharePoint as the enterprise file structure, we can offload all these PDFs into that particular structure if need be. But I would argue that Omnidek's easier to go search things and go find the things that you're looking for. Because one of the limitations of a folder structure is a file, an individual file, can only live in one place, right? It's in the job file or it's in the vendor file. It can't be in both, or we got to make a duplicate. In Omnidek's case, everything's in data form. And we use a new concept called channels to look at data at varying degrees. So I can go run a query on a particular employee, maybe a piece of equipment, maybe the F-250 truck or whatever else, maybe a particular item that we installed at a location. How many times did we service that item? If I were to kind of give you an example here, this is one of our customers. So this is the customer file that can be pulled out of our CRM system. This is actually coming from our accounting system. I look down here, this is the chronological order of all the activity. So what's the last timesheet we did for them? I can drill into here and ask Adam, hey, were you able to get Jordan's questions answered because they were simply mentioned on the form through the form fill out. In addition to that, this is actually keeping track of all the different form types that would ever be submitted that could have referenced carryoff. So in this example, this is every timesheet, every project center report. If I want to say, how did these guys even come to us? What was the original project request that spawned their instance? Well, this is the whole conversation thread with the team that onboarded them. And I can chime in or ask questions and get more details. The value in this is no one actually had to administer this. The system creates this channel as a byproduct of you committing more processes to the particular intranet portal. Now, the last piece of this, which is super, super powerful and super easy to implement, is the fact that Omnidek not only can handle the intranet portal like I've been demonstrating you today, but it can also facilitate the outward-facing portal requirements. An example of this is actually ours. We have data rooms for our investors, customers that submit warranty requests or support tickets. We have contractors. We have prospective hires and new hires. I can build a portal experience for anybody that would interact with my business. In this case, I'll give you the new hire example. This is our new hire portal. We say, hey, welcome to the Omnidek new hire portal. Anybody in that new hire group gets this view. And I say, hey, welcome to the family. We're so excited to have you work here. And here's our little hoorah message. And then I need you to fill out your new hire packet as step 1. And then step 2 is if you've got any vacation planned, let us know about it so we can get it on the calendar. This process here can take all of about 5 minutes to create. And the end result of this is how Omnidek onboards a new hire in this example. The first email that they get in their Omnidek inbox is an invitation to the Omnidek portal. I put their email address in. I select them as a free user because they don't work for the company yet. And I invite them to that new hire portal that I created. That walks them through a series of setting up their username and their login, their profile, and everything else. And then once they're logged in, this is their experience that I just created for them. In one screen, I can simply come in here, fill out my new hire packet. We support the embedded PDFs, right? So this is the W-4 and maybe the employee handbook and all the things that I'm going to require them to fill out. They can simply start filling this thing out electronically, dropping their digital signature on it as well, completing it, and then processing it through the portal. And then they're back to their inbox, and then they can request their out of office. Instead of emailing this to somebody in HR, they're effectively collaborating and answering questions here at the packet level with the HR representative. Maybe they didn't take a good picture of their driver's license, or they maybe forgot to answer a particular question or something like that. In this case, it's all done in a closed private environment without any paper created. So this is really the power of Omnidek, this ability to create not only the internal experience, but also the external experience for every one of your employees moving forward. Now, I'll kind of end on this note. Everything that I've kind of shown you to this point, when you get Omnidek, it's a blank canvas. It's designed for you to build on your own. And we try to do our best to empower you as an end user to really take control of this, to think through the processes that are really driving your business. And one of the things that generally matures out of that is we start realizing that when we bought all of these applications, and maybe now's the time to kind of look at them as possibly replacing them with a solution like Omnidek, if you truly start whiteboarding a process, especially one that drives like a daily activity, like what's your production units, what's your labor costs, things along those lines, you really start realizing that there's a subset of data that you're collecting that's really telling the story on a daily basis, that's driving what the executive team and the project management groups should be seeing on a daily basis. And when you look at that with the flexibility and you start ironing out that, hey, we see good projects and we see bad projects. We know this is a bad project because of X, Y, Z. We should have seen this earlier, or we know that this is a good one because these production units were out of the roof. So maybe we want to try to hit that production goal. When we start breaking that down at a whiteboard level, and now you have Omnidek with the ability to design any daily experience from it, then what this opens up the opportunity for is that Omnidek underneath the hood is a Azure SQL database, as well as has a public API, and it's synchronizing your accounting data, right? So I now have a central hub of data that you can now report on. And where that personifies itself out is in practical implementations of Power BI, real-time visualizations of maybe my production team and who's doing the best. Maybe it's line graphs to see, production units going up or down based upon, maybe weather conditions or something along those lines. But because I can now subscribe to this data holistically, both ERP as well as what's out in process in the intranet portal, I have full access to be able to build any type of experience that I want for the executive group. And I can start building processes from the visibility down and letting Omnidek simply be the support agent for collecting the required data to give you that visualization. And this is kind of the last thing that I just wanted to point out. So this is Omnidek. I certainly appreciate you sitting in. Obviously, we're gonna have somebody follow up with you at the back end of this webinar presentation. If you'd like to take a little bit deeper dive, we generally do kind of a secondary, more one-on-one demonstration for you and your team. We can build specific processes that maybe you want to see kind of how we would interpret that or what that would look like in your demo. We don't mind doing that at all. So I definitely would encourage you that if this is something that's on the radar or something that's possibly on the roadmap, or maybe you're just kind of looking to figure out, is there an alternative to maybe what you're planning on doing with Sharepoint, maybe what you've already done, I definitely encourage you to explore Omnidek more. So I'll stick around a little bit. I'm effectively done here. So I'll open the floor if anybody has any questions. Feel free to chat there, and I'll actually unmute just if anybody has a question they just want to voice that, we can do that as well. But thank you guys for participating. Trying to unmute. I don't know how to.